Welcome to the Lemons and Pineapples podcast. I'm your host, Emma O'Brien, personal development coach, heart math practitioner, dog photographer, and entrepreneur. In this podcast, I share tools, strategies, and amazing guest interviews to help you improve your mindset and your well-being with a sprinkle of fun and probably some mention of dogs along the way. So without further ado, let's squeeze the day. Before we jump into today's episode, I'm looking for a handful of people who can beta test a new coaching package I'm offering. I work with people who are stuck in their lives or careers and would like support in making changes, as well as people who battle with the effects of stress and anxiety. If you feel you would benefit from some coaching, which I'm going to offer at a 50% discount for my beta testers, please send me a DM on Instagram at Emma O'Brien Coach and we can arrange a time to chat. Hi folks, welcome to episode 14 of the podcast. Today my guest is Leslie Draffin and we're going to be talking about microdosing. First up, a little bit about Leslie. Leslie Draffin is an internationally certified menstrual cycle coach, a microdosing practitioner, psychedelic integration guide, feminine embodiment mentor, and podcast host who is passionate about helping people embrace their bodies, cycles, and psychedelics. She supports conscious women and menstruators who want to heal themselves through intentional microdosing, psychedelic integration, womb reconnection, and cyclical living. Leslie believes sacred earth medicine has the power to bring us home to ourselves, awaken our authenticity, and heal the trauma locked within our subconscious. Welcome to the podcast, Leslie.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great to have you here, and I'm very excited for our chat today. So, having ventured into the world of psychedelics myself in the last year, I know how valuable they are as a healing tool and a self-growth tool, which we're going to be talking about. But for people who perhaps have heard the term microdosing, have heard about psychedelics, but are not sure what it is, could you give us a bit of a definition of exactly what microdosing is?
Sure. So microdosing is a bit different than a full dose journey on psychedelics, where you might experience hallucinations or strange body sensations. When you microdose, you're usually ingesting a very small, non-intoxicating, non-hallucinating amount of some form of psychedelic substance. In the case that I work with clients, it's usually magic mushrooms or psilocybin, but people microdose all sorts of things, MDMA. You can microdose even cannabis, right? And so the really amazing thing about microdosing is that at small doses, you still get these amazing benefits of these psychedelic medicines, things like neuroplasticity, better mood, help around things like chronic pain, deeper connection to the divine, helping you to really find your purpose and passion. And for me personally, I began microdosing in an attempt to really connect with pleasure and to feel more open to receiving pleasure. And while I did end up getting that almost a year later, what was so interesting is it really helped support me through some serious mental health struggles that I went through in 2022, things like anxiety, depression, PTSD, and burnout. And so even at this tiny little dose, I was still able to have massive benefits and massive results that really helped me navigate through the dark night of my soul. And so when you're looking at the nitty gritty of microdosing and we're talking about how much to take, that's always a question I get. It's usually 1/10 to 1/20 of what's considered a recreational dose, but it's 0.1 to 0.5 grams or 100 milligrams to 500 milligrams. And that's usually a good sweet range for most people. Some folks who are very sensitive, I have clients who are very sensitive, they may start even smaller. And again, what's so special is that really small doses have a really big impact. It's not one of those things where the more you take, the more you get. The thing about microdosing is you really want to find just that perfect that range, that you're feeling the benefits, you're not taking too much so that you start to feel impaired, and yet you're still able to have these beautiful, life-changing, transformational experiences with something that's medicine from the earth.
Yeah, and it's well, I find this whole thing fascinating. The whole thing with microdosing is that for anybody listening, is that you shouldn't feel any effects from it. And coming to what you're saying about dosing, and it might take a little bit of playing with that dose.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for anyone who's thinking about starting microdosing, you certainly want to do the first dose on a day where you're not having to go anywhere and you're not having to, just in case. And then you can tweak that dose. So my understanding is you should take it almost just before the point where you'd start to feel the physical effects of it and any kind of psychological effects of it. But you want it it's that very sweet spot with the dosage. So
one thing that I think is really interesting and something that I have shifted my language around is the not feeling anything. Because I used to, when I began this work, and even when I would explain this to people before I was trained, I would say the same thing. Sub-perceptual is a word that gets thrown around a lot. And so I have really shifted to saying non-intoxicating, because I believe you actually should feel something. You can feel something. And the feeling is your heart opening, a calm presence, the ability to notice things in nature or in your life that, maybe you never noticed before. And so I think that's something that folks get a bit confused about. Oh, I shouldn't feel anything at all. And then they want to know, well, I don't feel like this is working. And so one way I always say that you can tell it is working. Do you feel more open in your heart space? Do you feel like your meditations are deeper? Do you feel like you're noticing beautiful synchronicities in life? Are you noticing signs? A lot of people will notice like their spirit animals more often. And so thank you so much for, opening that part up to conversation, because a lot of people think they should feel nothing at all. And physically and there's certainly not going to be trippy effects. But I also do think that you can expect to feel something really beautiful. And it might be a little bit different than what you'd experience on just a day where you're not ingesting the medicine.
Yeah, and that's a really great reframe for it. And thank you for that point. The one thing I think you don't want to feel is high.
Right.
Unless you want to, but then it's not 100%. Microdosing.
Exactly.
So microdosing shouldn't make you feel high. But I think that's a really, really great point you've made about that. Because the one thing I have noticed, for whatever reason, I did a macrodose of mescaline in December last year, which was a complete life changer. And we're going to be talking about that on your podcast.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I became really attuned to after that big dose was birds singing.
Aha. Yeah, you did.
I did. And so now it's the first thing I notice. I'm very attuned to hearing birds singing, which is just the nicest thing, because I think, oh, the birds are singing. It's so lovely. And I think the microdosing I have done, so I microdosed in March this year and again in May this year, it's just fine-tuned that connection with nature for me, and the ability to go outside and feel calm and just enjoy and be present. That was a big shift for me, is the presence of the birds. And when you're listening to the birds singing, you can't be worrying about 20 other things, and you just I've learned which bird is which and which bird I'm listening to. And it actually just brings me such joy. It's a tiny little thing, and it just makes me happy. So there's been a huge thing. Interesting you talking about why you started microdosing. And I think the one thing with this conversation around psychedelics is the intentionality piece. If you're listening to this and you want to take them to just go and get wasted with your friends, please carry on, because nobody here is saying you can't do that. But the conversation here, I think, is using them intentionally for healing, like you said, unlocking trauma, being able to feel more open, feel more present. And interesting that you chose to do them to heal some quite heavy stuff by the sounds of things. And I chose to microdose because I thought, I'm going to experiment with the psilocybin here, because I'd quite like to feel more creative.
Yeah.
That was the last thing I felt. That was not what happened.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so fascinating, especially about mushrooms. They don't always give you what you want, they'll give you what you need. And so when we're so caught up in the modern lives we live, we think we need this one thing, like more creativity. In my case, it was to receive pleasure, to be open to receiving pleasure. And what I got was just a deep trust in being able to receive, period.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, receiving support throughout an entire year of really serious mental health struggles. And so, yeah, it's funny. They have a little sense of humor, these cosmic alien teachers. And so you wanted to be more creative. What did you get?
I just got a whole load of difficulties that popped up. I had a whole load of challenges, but they were challenges that forced me to say, no, that's not okay. That forced me to stand up for myself, that forced me to face some things that I was afraid of. What they did was they got me on this journey of stopping playing small.
Yeah.
And the lessons were big. I had I won't go into detail about it, but I had a client who was really very unpleasant, and it was a corporate client, and we'd had an agreement in place and they didn't want to stick to that agreement, and they tried to throw their legal clout around with me, and I had an opportunity to either roll over and go, I'm not going to fight this, or say, this isn't okay for me. And I reached out in my circle for some help. And would you believe it? I got referred to a lawyer to help me. The guy helped me, wrote a whole letter, didn't charge me anything. So it was kind of this gift that actually was a gift, the whole thing was a gift. Yeah. And it was the strangest thing to me, because I just thought, this, and it wasn't like I had 5 minutes of his time, it was a few hours of his time. He should have, I don't know. Yeah. I was expecting to be charged quite a lot of money for it. And I had this wonderful, wonderful gift. And I think it then reinforced for me that it's okay to stand up for myself. I should be standing up for myself. Look what happens when I do. And look, I get supported when I choose to make a decision that feels better for me. Because I sat with it and thought, I've got two options here. Either I fight this or I take it. And the option of kind of being steamrollered did not feel good for me at all.
Powerful.
So just talking through this now, I've really kind of got in touch with my inner sense of yes and no for stuff.
Yes, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So but it wasn't very pleasant at the time. And I remember thinking, geez, this was not what I was expecting. I was expecting some deep creative downloads. I was expecting ideas for I'm a photographer, some photography projects, some wonderful stuff. And what I got was a very, very difficult month or so.
And that happens, right? I've worked with many clients, and myself included, when you begin to invite this medicine into your life. I usually say that from the moment you decide that you want to work with this medicine, you are saying to the universe, I'm open to whatever comes. And a lot of times what comes up are things that are difficult and painful. I had a client earlier this year, and they don't mind me talking about them on podcasts and all the things. And their intention was to connect more deeply with their body, and they're non-binary. And so what came up for them during our time together with the medicine was a lot of body issues, pain, people attacking them. And so what's interesting is sometimes when the medicine begins to work within us, it does bring up things that are painful and things that we don't want to look at, and things that just heighten maybe the intention itself and the reason behind the intention. And even though your intention was to be more creative, well, can you even be creative when you're being small?
No.
So it's one of those things where when folks experience medicine work on their own and these challenges come up, it can be so hard to figure out why this happening when I wanted this. And so what I usually say is, this is an expanding experience. And so the things that happen may be showing you where, you have room to expand. And also that's another reason why I believe intention is so important, because if you go into this work without an intention, it'll expand something that you don't want it to expand, you know? And so
Yay!
so even if you have an intention that's really beautiful, mine was, to be open to receiving pleasure. What I have discovered the medicine heard was to be open to receive. And they found a shitload of ways to rip out my job from under me, to rip out my mental health from under me, to take 2 of my 3 dogs from me, so that I was forced open. Yeah. And in the end, several months later, I can very honestly say that although it was the most trying and difficult and heartbreaking experience of my life last year, now we are over a year after, and it was also the most beautiful.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. And what I hear from you is that the request for being open to receiving pleasure was heard, but if you're not open to receiving anything, pleasure is the last thing on the list. So you have to be open 100%. To receiving support, to be letting people in, to be open to being vulnerable with people. For me, if I visualize it, it's the end of the scale. It's like a number 10 on a receiving scale. But if you can't receive at a number 1 level, sorry for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just fascinating when I hear people's experiences of things being difficult. I think that's why support is so essential, especially if it's your first time working with the medicine. And again, knowing that they're going to give you what you need, not necessarily what you want. And that can be very difficult to navigate. Yes. And so whether it's a guide like myself, a therapist that you feel comfortable speaking with, I think that that's essential, because tough shit definitely can come up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the thing, that integration work is so important. And I did quite a lot of journaling around it. And I was sitting with the question when things were really hard. What do I need to know here? What do I need to learn here? Why is this experience showing up for me? And I notice when something shows up one time, maybe that's just life. But when it shows up repeatedly, the universe is going, excuse me, hello, there's something here for you to work on. Yeah. And you can fight it, or you can sort of surrender to it and say, all right, fine, let me learn the lesson, because the quicker I learn it, quicker it goes away. And I was journaling with, why is this happening? What have I been doing to allow this situation to show up? And a lot of it for me was not being firm enough with boundaries, not being firm enough with contracts, with this situation that I shared with the lawyers involved. Essentially what was happening was a big corporate was trying to steamroller me as a teeny tiny 1-person business. Yeah. And I was completely in the right, but it made me have a look at, am I definitely in the right? And then what am I going to do differently next time so this doesn't happen again? I think that's the big thing when lessons like this happen. Sometimes, and it could have been my fault for not being tight enough with boundaries, in which case that's why I consulted with a lawyer before I did anything. I would have taken it on the chin and said, you know what, here's some school fees. Let me make sure this doesn't happen again. But it was an opportunity for boundaries. And this has been, I have to say, 2023 for me has been the year of boundaries. Perfect. That has been the theme for me of where can I set boundaries? I've had in the past month or so many opportunities where I have been forced to say no to people. And I've realized it's made me so uncomfortable. But again, I've been sitting with that. Why am I uncomfortable with it? And what are the consequences of me saying no? Wait, nothing. Nobody's been upset by it. They've respected it. So if I set boundaries in a firm but kind way, people respect them. I mean, there you go. Then we end of story. Yeah. Why are you still fighting with it?
Yeah. And I think that's one reason why, I mostly work with women or people who are womb bearers, people with menstrual cycles. But I think that what you're explaining too, that whole needing to set boundaries and feeling like you've been playing small, I think that's one reason why microdosing, specifically psilocybin, is so impactful for us, because society in itself really just wants us to be small, to be submissive, to be weak. And I wholeheartedly believe that this medicine wants the exact opposite from us. It wants us to stand in our power. It wants us to take on the feminine leadership roles that we were born into, that are our birthright. It wants us to experience the most pleasure out of life we possibly can. And I also see mushrooms as a very feminine energy. And so when I speak to people and they tell me things like this, like the fact that it bolstered up this ability for you as someone who had issues with boundaries before, who was the small one-man show type thing against this corporate giant, like, it doesn't surprise me that these, beautiful teachers, these fungi teachers, took what Emma needed and were like, oh, hell yeah, we're about to blow this up. Because I really think that when we and I see this more often, and let me be clear, I work much more often with women than with men, but I also see this more often just online with women. We want this life change. We want this transformation. We want more. And that's exactly what this gives us.
Yeah, totally. And interesting, I did a macrodose of mushrooms, and after doing this was in between the two microdosing sessions, and after doing the San Pedro ceremony, I'd found the physical sensations of a big dose quite overwhelming, and that was a very interesting experience. So I chose to take a slightly smaller dose. So I took a 2-gram dose rather than a 3-gram dose, and I didn't really get into the journey particularly. Yeah. I was very distracted by everything else that was going around. I got very, very agitated. And again, I sat with it. What is the learning for the agitation here? Because it was a really unpleasant, uncomfortable experience. But I thought, I know there's a lesson in here. I know the mushrooms, the medicine is giving me what I need. Don't really think I need this right now, but I'm going to roll with it. And I'd said to the shaman who had led the ceremony afterwards, and she said, when you said to me you wanted to do a smaller dose, my immediate thought was, here she is playing small. So, because she said to me, we do know about the dosing here, and it's not really relative to your body size necessarily. Right. So I thought, well, that's the last time I play small with these. But it was fascinating. And I have incarnated in this earthly form as a very small person, which is quite an interesting piece as well. I am literally probably a couple of inches over being an official midget. So it is very, very interesting. This theme of being small and standing up and taking up space and saying no has been huge. And I don't think I'd have got to any of this without the plant medicine.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think that's really the biggest issue with the fact that so much of this is still demonized, taboo, made illegal in many parts of the world. It's that what you just said. I never would have gotten here without it. And I with all of my being, I believe that the governments that have decided to outlaw this aren't worried about us, jumping off a roof or whatever. They're worried about us waking up. They're worried about us taking charge of our lives. And because when we see ourselves as these empowered beings who don't play small anymore, we're not controllable. And so that for me is one reason why I'm just praying that, especially here in the States, we're seeing some movement towards potentially at least, if not decriminalization, changing where they are on the schedule list. Right now, they are seen as no therapeutic benefits whatsoever, just as bad as meth and cocaine and heroin and all these things. And so I'm really hoping we'll see some movement. But I think that so many people out there have this idea in their head, oh, well, the law says this and that. And I think that the pandemic for me showed that we don't have loving governments. They do not love us. And so we know there are millions of people out there who are already self-medicating in these ways. We are two people who have experienced this ourselves. And I think that for folks who are listening who might be, because I was that person several years ago, too worried, too scared, too freaked out about the ramifications. For me, it became, I'm either going to be on so many pharmaceutical drugs that I'm going to be a zombie and I'm going to have all of these terrible physical issues because of the side effects, or I turn to earth, I turn to Pachamama, I turn to this sacred medicine and see what happens. And I really believe that when you enter into an agreement with it, with respect and honor and integrity, it protects you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the other sort of more, I guess, kind of the word I want to use is global takeaway is that we are all interconnected as people, and the plant medicine has made me a more compassionate person, a calmer person, a kinder person, a more accepting person, a more aware person in terms of my impact on the environment. I mean, I'm a bit of a tree hugging, animal loving creature already, but it has made me so much more attuned to showing up better. Imagine if everybody showed up better and we all stopped being so materialistic with I need to have the biggest, baddest car to look better than the other person. It would be a disaster. But that's probably a whole other conversation for another day.
Yeah, no, true. I think, I heard somewhere, I don't know where I read this, but there was this person who was talking about they really believe that, mushrooms are sentient beings, and their agenda is to get us to take care of the earth, which takes care of them so they can grow and take care of us. Yes. So that is this full circle moment. And so exactly what you're saying, if we all started to see each other as one, would there be war? Would there be, this capitalistic system that suppresses others and elevates people to be trillionaires? Like, no, there wouldn't. No. We would understand that you are just as valuable as I am, as valuable as that person is, and the earth is. And so, I think that the more people who experience plant medicine, hopefully the more people wake up, and one day it'll be a huge collective healing, because I believe that if we want to heal the planet and we want to save Earth and we want to save each other, we have to do the work ourselves on the individual level, spread that into our immediate community, and then together we heal the collective.
I totally agree with you. And I think it's doing that work of the self-work, inner work is so important. And I think the more we have people out there who are living consciously and showing up consciously and conscious of the energy you're putting out and the interaction, it has a massive ripple effect. Even just with, I've noticed on days where I am super attuned, I'm in a really good space, I'm in a high positive energy, people let you in traffic. People are polite at the supermarket. Yes. People show up entirely differently. And if we imagine if we were all doing that, it makes a huge difference. And I think coming back to before we go off on a mega tangent somewhere else, coming back to the plant medicine, I would credit that with my personal transformation. And I think that comes back to your point about the intentionality with it. I mean, if you were to do it to see, I wonder what would happen actually, if you were to do it with the intention of seeing how I could show up better in the world, that could have some very interesting short-term effects, but fantastic long-term effects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last question for you. In terms of the practicality, how long did you microdose for? Because you were dealing with some quite heavy, deep stuff. What was your microdosing schedule like?
So when I first started, I immediately hired a coach, and we worked together for about 3.5 months. We had to take a bit of time off because of some personal things that had gone on, because I really don't believe you want to microdose or full dose when things are very elevated, when there's a lot of grief, when there's a lot of anxiety, because again, it will magnify that. But about 3.5 months, and I would usually microdose 3 to 4 times a week. And then I took some time off, and then I did a couple of full dose journeys. And then this year I did about 10 weeks on a cyclical microdosing approach, which is a protocol I created myself around the cycle, and then took some time off, did about another 6 to 8 weeks. So I did something in late December through February, May. And then I really have not been on a protocol since May. I have ingested the medicine a few times when I was on vacation to just experience Hawaii more. We'd gone on a vacation to Hawaii. And also because I no longer drink, I this is a total other podcast, but I credit it for helping me be sober. When I'm in situations where it's a social engagement and I have a bit of social anxiety, I will ingest medicine at a microdose level to help me with that. And so I think that's one thing folks may miss with the intentionality. You know, a lot people may say that I was recreationally ingesting medicine because I was taking it before a party. I think that even if you want to, intention is to have fun. That's intention, right? So I think a lot of folks that might deem things recreational, go to a concert, eat mushrooms, have a great time. If you have that intention and you're thinking of it that way, that can be it too. But I think that what's really essential for anyone who's trying to enter into a microdosing protocol is to remember a few things. One, we do not microdose every day. There are a lot of different reasons for that, which I do discuss in my free microdosing guide. And two, we want to take time off after the protocol because that's when we find the messages. That's when we see all the things that you've experienced, right? And they come up for us in the midst of the medicine work too. But when we take a pause, we can start to notice, oh, wow, I really do notice these birds so much often, even though I'm not microdosing today. Wow, I really do see myself letting this person into traffic, me caring about the homeless person on the side of the street. So like crying because of this experience that they've had. And that's the beauty. You know, this is a cumulative thing. As you work with it over time, it works more and more potently within yourself. And also, it has this beautiful ability to be something we don't need for life. Like, we're not going to need to microdose for life. You know, you may turn to it again in XYZ number of years, months, or weeks. But that's one thing a lot of folks think, and is this my whole life from now? Am I always going to take this? No, it's not a drug. It's not a pharmaceutical drug where you're going to need it forever. It'll help you turn the tide into whatever you're currently experiencing. And if you do the integration work, really make big shifts, and maybe you leave it forever, or maybe you leave it for just a little while. And I love that about it because I don't necessarily now feel the need to enter into a protocol again anytime soon.
Yes, thank you for that, because I did the first microdose I did 45 days, and I did the Fadiman protocol of 1 day on, 2 days off.
Okay.
And then I just kind of stopped because I think I'd got what I needed from it, and I stopped. And then the second time I did it was shorter, and probably maybe for about 3 weeks. And again, I just stopped. And I think that's the thing. There isn't a point where you have to wean yourself off. And I'd read that in the books that you'll stop when you feel you're done for the time being. And I thought, don't know how that's going to be. Well, you just stop. I think it's like an intuitive, cool, we don't need to do it.
Yeah. My clients, usually I work with them for 8 weeks, and it's not uncommon for by the 8th week, for them to be like, oh yeah, I really haven't microdosed this week. I'm like, great. And take some time if you need to, and know that you can turn back to this because you have the tools now. And if you need me, I'm here. But I think that that's what's, one, so terrifying to the pharmaceutical companies, but two, so beautiful about this medicine is that it is here to support you. Literally, that is like its mission in the world, is to connect and support, just like the mycelial network connects and supports all of the things underneath the earth. And yeah, it's just, I don't know where I would be without this. I mean, I can imagine, and it wouldn't be good. And so, yeah, I just am so thankful for, finding this when I did. And also knowing that even though at this current juncture of life, I'm not reaching for, the medicine, it's always there. It's like it's like having something have your back and having such full trust in that you can do anything. You're so supported, you're so uplifted because you know that something bigger than yourself is supporting you and holding you up.
Yeah. And I think that's just brilliant. I'm feeling called to do before the end of the year, another big San Pedro dose, because I thoroughly enjoyed that. But yeah, I'm listening to, do I feel called to do it? And currently, no. And again, that's the beauty of it, is causa reliability. It's not addictive. It's an intuitive medicine.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
And just one thing too, because we're really, I think, both very clearly people who understand. And also there are folks out there who are dealing with a lot, who are dealing with difficult things. And I think that's that's something that happens often when you maybe don't have support, or maybe you don't have the right support, or maybe you just have a lot, right? Mm-hmm. You may feel like you need this medicine. You've said it's not addictive, but we do have, as humans, this ability to feel psychologically dependent. And so if you feel like you can't get through the day without it, like you have to do a full dose journey, maybe you just did one. I posted a meme the other day and it was like, someone doesn't want to integrate their journey, they just want more medicine. Like if you find yourself in that space, please call me. It's yes. Like that is a big sign to show that, support can be really helpful. And while the medicine is not addictive, it can be something that we use in ways that can be addictive.
Yes.
Because life is difficult. The things we want to go through, move through, or maybe not even move through, the trauma within us is sometimes deeply embedded and deeply ingrained. And sometimes when we're in these medicine experiences, that might be the only time we feel okay.
Yes. Yes, great point. And I think we've talked about using it with deep intentionality, having been on a coaching journey and having had some training around it. And I think for people who are thinking, I've got some trauma to dig into with this, please hire a coach with that. Please get supported, because the integration is the really important bit with this. Because like you've said, Leslie, if you don't integrate, it can be really easy to think you need, or to feel like you have to, want to, are reliant on doing it a big dose very often. And the integration is key with that. It's just so important, because it will help you get the learnings from it, and it will help you use the medicine skillfully to get you into a better space.
100%.
Leslie, thank you very much. This has been a brilliant conversation. Please, could you let people know where they can get hold of you and where they can find your free microdosing guide?
Sure. So the easiest place to find me is on Instagram at Leslie Draffin. I highly recommend you join my email newsletter. I put out all the information about freebies, discounts, so on and so forth. And we can talk much more openly about things on the newsletter than we can on socials. You can sign up for that in the link in my bio, or just send me a message on Instagram with the word letter. My free guide is called Activate Your Inner Magic. It is an ebook. It includes a meditation and also a planner to help you really track your microdosing. And you can get that as well on my social media. I have a podcast called The Light Within, which Emma's going to be on in a few weeks. And just email me if you need to chat. hello@lesliedraffin.com.
Wonderful. Leslie, thank you very much. This has been great. And I will see you for our podcast soon. Thank you for listening, everybody, and for being here. And we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please share with your friends, and be sure to leave me a 5-star rating and review, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. To find out more about my one-on-one coaching, please visit my website, which is emmaobriencoach.com. And remember, folks, when life gives you lemons, you can always choose another fruit. See you next time.